Hello and welcome to my YouTube. This is an introduction to using Reverb on an E463 keyboard. There are dozens of YouTubes that will tell you all about Reverb, what it is, how to use it, how to edit it. It goes on and on and on. This YouTube tells you how to set it up on an E463 keyboard. Let's start with what is reverb. Reverb, commonly shortened from reverberation, is a persistence of a sound after it is produced. Reverberation is created when a sound is reflected. This causes numerous reflections to build up and then decay as the sound is absorbed by the surfaces of objects, which could include walls, ceilings, floors, furniture, and even people. Well, isn't reverb just an echo? No. This is an echo. You send out a sound, it strikes a surface and bounces straight back to you. That's an echo. Hello, 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 hello. This is reverb. You're sitting out here in the audience. Someone is speaking or playing a musical instrument. Some of the sound comes directly to you, but most of the sound goes somewhere else. For example, this sound wave bounces off of the ceiling and then comes and hits you in the face. This sound wave bounces off of the back wall, hits the ceiling, and then hits you in the face. This sound wall hits the ceiling, hits the back wall, and then hits you in the back of the head. So the sound is coming at you from all different directions, and it is arriving at different times. And this is what reverb is. If I took you blindfolded into a closet and sang, and then I took you blindfolded into a cathedral and sang, I'm sure you could tell the difference. And that's what reverb does. It tells us something about the place we're in, how big it is, and it also tells us how far away we are from whatever is producing the sound. That's reverb. There are 12 different types of reverb available in the E463 keyboard. And here they are. There is Hall 1 through 4. Hall 1, Hall 2, Hall 3, Hall 4. What's the difference in them? Hall 4 simply has more reverb in it than Hall 1. And this is what it would sound like if you were playing in a concert hall. Cathedral. The name tells you what it's going to sound like. This is great for pipe organs, and it gives you the effect of standing in a huge cathedral. Room 1 through 3. This is what it would be like to sing or play in a small room. Stage 1 through stage 4. This is good for solo instruments, and this is like standing on a stage in a small auditorium of 200 to 500 seats. And then there's something called plate. Most people have never seen this. I've only seen one of them in my entire life. There is plate 1 and plate 2. And this is a steel plate reverb, and I'm going to explain it to you in just a second. And then actually there is a 13th setting, and that is off. You can just turn reverb totally off. Okay, so that's the different types of reverb that the E463 can produce. Let me tell you about plate reverb. It's really strange. What they do is they take a huge, thick steel plate and they hang it, suspend it so it's free to move and vibrate. And then they send a sound against this and they record the vibrations that come off of it. Here's the way it works. So here's a big steel plate, and they have a big speaker pointed right at it a few inches away. They send a sound into this speaker. The speaker hits the steel plate vibrates from the sound. And there are these little devices called transducers. These pick up these vibrations, turn them back into sound. They come back here and they mix all of these sounds, and that's what we hear. So this is what a plate reverb is. And in the studios, they actually had these huge plates, and they send the sound and bounce the sound off of them. Plate reverb. It's really, really good for things like snare drums. Now, reverb can be applied to the main voice, the dual voice, the style, and the split voice. Once you've selected one of the 12 reverbs, that one reverb is applied to everything. The main voice, the dual voice, the split voice, and the style. In other words, I can't have one reverb for the main voice and a different reverb for the split voice. Whatever you set, that is applied to all of the voices and the style. You can control how much reverb is applied to each of the voices individually, and you can apply reverb to the style if you want. So, to get going, you must decide two things. The first thing is, okay, which of the 12 types of reverbs do you want to use? And next, how much reverb, if any, do you want to apply to the main voice, the dual voice, the split voice, and the style? So you may only apply reverb to the main voice, and that's fine. Or maybe you apply it to the style by itself, and that's fine. Or maybe the main voice and the dual voice get reverb, but nothing else. You can apply it in any combination to the main, dual, split, and style. It's up to you. A common mistake by beginners and amateurs is to apply too much reverb and use it all the time in all their music. Your music just gets muddled and muddy, and it's hard to hear the individual instruments. So amateurs tend to overdo it. So how do you actually go about setting up and selecting which of the 12 reverbs you will use? Let's go through that. The 12 reverb types are set with function number 36. Function number 36. And if you don't know how to set functions, I have done an entire YouTube on the function button. So you can go watch that to understand how functions are set. And then come back here and dial up function number 36. That's where you get to choose which one of the reverb types you want to use. So this is the way it works. You press the function button and just tap it. Don't press and hold it. That does something else. Just reach out and tap the function button. Then use the category buttons to select function number 36. And here's the category buttons. So you're going to sit here and keep tapping this one and watch the screen until you finally get to function 036. That's where you need to go. Okay? Once you get there, then we're going to be able to use the rotary dial to select which of the 12 functions we want. Got ahead of myself. So after you get there, this is what it says. The rotary dial will be used, and we'll sit here and watch the screen as we dial this to choose which of the 12 we want. Here's a video showing it for real. So I've already got it set up to 36, function 36. Here I go. I'm dialing the wheel and I'm watching the screen, and you can dial through all 12 of the reverbs. In fact, I ended up on number 13, which is off. And you could go back and forwards. So that's how you actually choose the reverb. You simply dial it up, and when you see the one you want, just stop. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. You have now selected the reverb type. The reverb for the main voice, the dual voice, and the style reverb are all controlled the same way with the live control. Let me go through this with you. Here's the live control, and it's on the far left edge of your keyboard. There are 2 buttons we need and 1 knob, knob number A. So there is something called the target button, and it has 2 positions, keyboard and backing. So every time you tap it, you switch back and forth between keyboard and backing. Keyboard is what you need to set up to control the main and the dual voice. So keyboard is the main and dual voice. Setting it to backing lets you send reverb into the style. So there's only 2 settings. Keyboard says I'm going to be working with either the main or the dual voice. Backing, I wish they'd called it style, but they didn't. They called it backing. Backing controls or allows you to send reverb into the style. So how do you know what it's set up for? I mean, there's no buttons or lights here. How do you know? And the answer is you look at the screen. Right here, this area right here, at all times is going to say one of 2 things, keyboard or backing. So that's how you know. If you punch this button, you just look right here and you will know which of the 2 settings you have. And once again, if you're going to put reverb in the main or dual voice, this needs to be set on keyboard. If you want to put reverb into the style, this needs to be set on backing. Okay, let's look over here. Knob assignment. Notice that there are 5 settings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So every time you press this, you will change the knob assign. And here's where you look to see what you have selected. This is always on the screen, and there will always be 1 number highlighted, lit up like this. Right now, it's number 2, and that's what we want for reverb. Look at this chart. Here's the word reverb right here. And if we go across, we see knob assigned number 2. So here's the deal. You need to punch this button until you have selected number 2, and you'll see it right here, knob assign 2. That's the only place we can control the reverb. So how do you control it once you've selected it? You use this knob. This knob A controls all of the things in this column, cutoff, reverb, DSP, attack. All we care about right now is the reverb. That's because we've set it on number 2. So knob assigned, number 2, and I see it right here on the screen. And now I'm going to use this knob to increase and decrease the reverb in the main and dual voice if I have it set up to keyboard. Right now, it's set up to backing. So this knob is going to control how much reverb I am sending into the style. Okay? This button first, do you want the main voice in dual or the style? And then be sure you're on number 2, and then this will control how much reverb you are applying. Notice what is missing. What is missing is the split voice. The split voice is not controlled by this at all. It is totally separate, and I'll go through that in just a moment. Okay. You can control how much reverb is applied to the main voice separate from the dual voice. When you go in and you set up target number 2 and you use the knob, you are applying reverb to both the main voice and the dual voice in the same amount. But here's the deal. You can go to function number 14, and this allows you to control how much reverb is applied to the main voice, and it goes from 0 to 127. Or you can go to function number 24, and this allows you to control how much reverb is applied to the dual voice. So using live controls, you're controlling both the main and the dual voices equally. Whatever you do is applied to both of them. But what I'm telling you is, I'll back up. Function 14 lets me control the reverb going into the main voice all by itself. And function 024 lets me control how much reverb is going into the dual voice all by itself, separate from the main voice. And function 034 controls how much reverb is applied to the split voice. And this is the only way you can apply reverb. You have to use the function button. You can't use the live controls, because the split voice is not controlled with those live control buttons and knobs. So setting reverb on the split voice, you press the function button right here, and then use the category buttons to select function number 34. And this is what it should look like: S.reverb. And that stands for split voice reverb. So function 34 lets me control the reverb. And then what I'm going to do, once I have it set up like this, I will use my rotary dial, and I will dial in how much reverb I want to put into the split voice. And this goes from 0, which will be no reverb at all the way up to 127, which is maximum reverb. In fact, here's a video showing me doing it. So I take my finger, and as I start rotating, there's full reverb, and now I'll back it off to 88. Here's 88%, and now I'll take it up to 115. So I use my finger and the rotary dial, and once I stop, that's it. It is now set. So I'm putting 115 amount of reverb out of 127 into the split voice. So it's a little more complicated. Quite frankly, I've made over 250 music YouTubes over the years. I have never put reverb into my split voice, but you can if you want to. Using reverb in the E463 is trying to reproduce the reverb we hear in the real world, but we're doing it with digital technology. So yeah, I could take my keyboard over to a big cathedral and record in there, and I would get the reverb. But I don't have to. I can do it right here in my home, in my music room, because my keyboard has reverb built into it. If you ripped the top off of your E463 and looked inside, this is what you would see. This is the main logic board of your E463 keyboard. This is the heart and guts. This is doing everything. All of the sounds you hear, all the reverb, the echo, the harmony, everything is being controlled by this computer board. And by the way, if something happened to your board, if you damaged it or blew it out or it got destroyed somehow, for $199 you can buy a new E463 logic board and stick it in there, and you've got a brand new keyboard. Okay, on this keyboard there is a reverb chip. So over the years, the bright engineers and physicists have figured out how to reproduce the sound of reverb in the rooms, and they have put that into a chip right here. So when you and I are applying reverb, this chip inside our keyboard is what's doing all the magic. So this is basically how it works. I have my keyboard, and let's say I set it up to sound like a pipe organ. So when I press the key, that sound is sent into the reverb chip inside my keyboard. And then the signal is sent into the speakers, either a loudspeaker I have attached or the speakers built right into my keyboard. And voila, wow, a pipe organ in a cathedral is what we hear, thanks to the magic of the reverb chip on the logic board inside our keyboard. Most of us will never have an opportunity to stand on a stage like this and perform with several hundred people. So if you did, there would be a certain reverb that this room would sound like. And even fewer of us will ever get to sit on a stage like this in some grand opera theater and perform. And this has a reverb sound that it produces. And as much as I would love to, I'm never going to get to go into some great cathedral in Europe and play their pipe organ. But I can reproduce the reverb in a cathedral in my E463 thanks to that reverb chip inside. So let's go live to the E463 keyboard and let's set up some reverbs and listen. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, you better have good sound. If you're just using your Android or your iPhone, it may be a little difficult for you to actually hear the differences in all the reverbs that I'm going to demonstrate. I have fancy multi-$100 headphones, so I can hear everything perfectly clear. It may not be as abundantly clear to you if you're just using the speakers in your smartphone or your tablet or even your desktop computer. I don't know how good your speakers are, but let's go. Here we are at the E463 keyboard, and what I'm going to do now is to demonstrate the use of reverb in the main voice, the dual voice, and the style. So let me preview where I'm going to go. The first thing I'm going to do is go select my reverb type, and I'll use function 036, and I'm going to choose cathedral because that's the most dramatic, the most powerful reverb, and so you'll be able to hear it. Then I'm going to set my main voice to a pipe organ, and I will set my dual voice to a violin. And then I will add reverb into the main voice and the dual voice, and I will demonstrate what reverb sounds like in the pipe organ and the dual voice, which is a violin. I will turn off the main voice, reduce it so you can hear the dual voice. And then finally, I'm going to apply reverb to the style. And I will play 2 or 3 different styles so you can hear what happens to the style when reverb is applied to it. So let's get going. So the first thing I need to do is select my type of reverb, one of the 12 types, and that is function 036. So I reach out to the function button and I press, and now I'm going to dial in. I'm going to dial in my cathedral, and I just use my rotary wheel, and here it is, number 5, and it says cathedral. So I have selected cathedral as the reverb, and that cathedral reverb will be applied to the main voice, the dual voice, and the style. I'm not going to bother showing how to apply it to the split voice because I think it's the least important thing to know. All right, so I've got my cathedral reverb selected. Next, I'm going to press my voice, and I have it set to a pipe organ. And now I'm going to set the dual voice to a violin. So I reach out and I press and hold dual, and I need voice number 061. And so I've already got it selected. So the dual voice is now a violin. So now I come over and I select my target to keyboard. And I look right here on the screen, and sure enough, it says keyboard. And then I use my knob assign button and press it, and I need to select number 2, which will give me access to reverb. And it turns out I've already got 2 selected. So I have the reverb applied to the main and the dual voice, and I've got the cathedral reverb selected. So now let's start listening to what it sounds like when reverb is applied to this pipe organ and to this violin. So I'm going to start with the dual voice turned off, and it's just the pipe organ. That's with no reverb. All right, now using the A knob, I'm going to begin to crank in some reverb. That's about halfway. This is without. This is with about 50%. I'm going to crank it up 3/4. That really sounds like I'm in a big cathedral. And notice how long it takes to decay away. I'm going to crank up full reverb. Listen how long the sound persists. Without and with. That is reverb applied to the main voice, which is a pipe organ. Now it's also, I'm going to turn on dual voice now. So I have both a pipe organ and a violin. And I'll turn it off. Unfortunately, the main voice organ is overpowering the dual voice, and we can't hear that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn down the volume on the main voice so we can hear the dual voice, and that is function 011. Okay, 011, M dot volume. So now with my rotary wheel, I'm going to dial down the volume on the main voice so we can hear the dual voice. There's the dual voice, the violin. And now I'm going to crank up the reverb so we can hear that on the violin. Here's without. Here's about halfway. So now I'll bring the main volume back up. And now we have both the pipe organ and the violin playing in about equal volume. That's with full reverb. This is without. So that's reverb being added to the main voice and the dual voice. So now let's go add reverb into my left hand, into the style. The reverb in the right will stay there. That doesn't change, but I will be adding it to the style now. All right. So the first thing I need to do is come over here to my target and set this to backing. Okay, it is on backing, meaning I'm going to add the reverb into the style. The second thing I need to check is my assign knob on number 2. And I look on the screen, and yes, it is, because now my knob A is going to control the reverb, but I'm sending reverb into the style. It's already in the main voice and the dual voice. Now I'm going to add it into the style. So let's see. I've chosen some styles here. Here's the first one. So here it is. Whoops. That's the style with no reverb in it. So now let me start cranking in the reverb. That's halfway. This is without. And this is with. Okay, let me change the style to number 45. 45. And this is without. Now let me start cranking reverb into the style. Okay. That's without. Here it comes with half reverb. Full reverb. That's with. This is without. And this is with. All right, let's change the style one more time. I'm going to dial in 066, which is called Pop R&B, and it sounds like this with no reverb. All right, now I'm going to crank in about 50% reverb. This is without. And this is with. So that's reverb. It can be added to the main voice, the dual voice, the style, and you can put it on the split if you want to. And you can control individually how much reverb is applied to the main voice versus the dual voice versus the style. But once you select the reverb type, in this case I selected cathedral, that cathedral reverb is being applied to all three voices. I can't choose to have cathedral on the main voice and room on the style. Whatever reverb I choose, that's the one I have to live with. So this is reverb, and what we're trying to do is reproduce what it sounds like in the real world if we went into an auditorium, or if we're in a small room, or the ultimate if I went into a huge cathedral to try to reproduce the reverberations, the reverb in those spaces. I hope you have found this helpful. If you have, go out and make some music.